You are live in the CNN newsroom. Thanks for staying with me. I'm Ana Cabrera in New York. Great to have you with us on a Sunday. We begin tonight with the credibility question and a major test for President Trump as he arrives back in Washington for a pivotal week. In less than 24 hours, the director of the FBI will testify before Congress, not only on the Trump campaign's possible ties to Russia, but also the president's repeated and unfounded claim that President Obama tapped his phones. And did we mention this will play out on live TV right here on CNN? For his part, President Trump insists he will be vindicated. But here's one thing we know for sure. Our own Justice Department sent a letter to the House Intelligence Committee. This is Trump's Justice Department saying there was no evidence of his wiretap claims.
A president doesn't go and physically wiretap something. So if you take the president literally, it didn't happen.
No evidence of any wiretapping of Trump Tower.
No, there was no FISA warrant that I'm aware of to tap Trump Tower.
I hope we can put an end to this wild goose chase, because what the president said was just patently false. And the wrecking ball it created now has banged into our British allies and our German allies. It's continuing to grow in terms of damage, and he needs to put an end to this.
CNN's Ryan Nobles joins me now from Washington. Ryan, everyone will be holding their breath, watching closely of the FBI director's testimony tomorrow. How did we get to this point?
Yeah, Anna, it's important to remember that this all started back in June as the primary campaign was wrapping up, and a report emerged that the server of the Democratic National Committee had been hacked.
The initial hack was soon connected to the Russian government. And wasting little time, Hillary Clinton's campaign manager linked the hack to then-candidate Donald Trump.
They possessed those emails that Russian state actors were feeding the emails to hackers for the purpose of helping Donald Trump.
Then, just as the Democratic National Convention was about to start, WikiLeaks unloaded a trove of DNC emails, among them damaging private conversations. It did not take long for the Republican nominee, Donald Trump, to embrace the hack and Russia's potential involvement.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
As the Clinton campaign worked to contain the political damage, Trump refused to back down from his kind words about Russia and its controversial leader, Vladimir Putin.
I've already said he is really very much of a leader, far more than our president has been a leader.
Days before the second presidential debate in October, two major bombshells. First, the Department of Homeland Security and Director of National Intelligence issued a statement blaming Russia for the hack. And second, WikiLeaks released another batch of stolen emails, unloading the inbox of top Clinton advisor John Podesta. At that debate, once again, Trump attempted to take the focus off Russia.
She doesn't know if it's the Russians doing the hacking. Maybe there is no hacking.
WikiLeaks wasn't done. More DNC emails were released on November 7th. The next night, a new president.
I pledge to every citizen of our land that I will be president for all Americans.
As he started to build his new administration, Trump still resisted blaming Russia.
It could be somebody sitting in a bed someplace. I mean, they have no idea.
President Obama ordered a full review of how Russia meddled in the election, which concluded it was working to help Trump.
Based on uniform intelligence assessments, the Russians were responsible for hacking the DNC.
Just 22 days before Trump took office, President Obama imposed new sanctions on the Russian government. On that same day, incoming National Security Advisor Michael Flynn spoke on the phone with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. It was later revealed he also texted the ambassador and met with him in person at Trump Tower, an administration official has told CNN. Trump associates, including Vice President Mike Pence, called the meetings introductory.
They did not discuss anything having to do with the United States' decision to expel diplomats or impose a censure against Russia.
But that turned out not to be true. Flynn specifically spoke about the sanctions. But Flynn wasn't the only one. Some Trump associates also held meetings with the ambassador at the Republican National Convention, but insist they were only introductory gatherings, attendee J.D. Gordon told CNN. Then Senator Jeff Sessions was one of them. But appearing before a Senate hearing on his confirmation, he said this when asked about possible contacts between the Trump campaign and Russian officials.
I did not have communications with the Russians, and I'm unable to comment on it.
But after taking office, Sessions, now Attorney General, admitted that he too, as a senator, met with Kislyak twice during the campaign. But he said it was in his capacity as a senator, not a member of the Trump campaign. Sessions decided to recuse himself from any investigation related to the campaign. Amidst all of this, the president himself took to Twitter, making this shocking claim. Quote, "How low has President Obama gone to tap my phones during this very sacred election process? This is Nixon/Watergate. Bad or sick guy." The accusation was made without any evidence to back it up, but led the White House to ask Congress to add this wrinkle to their broad investigation into Russia's role in the election. But at this point, even Republicans contend the evidence just isn't there.
I don't think there was an actual tap of Trump Tower.
Monday, congressional leaders will attempt to unpack the many layers of this controversy with the goal of making the situation clear for the American people.
And the White House continues to insist there was no collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, setting the stage for Monday's hearing where high-ranking officials such as FBI Director James Comey and National Security Agency Director Mike Rogers will testify. Anna?
Ryan Nobles, thanks for that very inclusive report. We appreciate it. Safe to say the Russians might just be watching these proceedings closely as well, even though many Russians CNN spoke to say they wish the question about the election meddling would just go away. Our senior international correspondent, Fred Plakin, joins me now from Moscow. So, Fred, has the Kremlin put out any rebuttal to this hearing?
Well, I mean, certainly before this hearing will start, the Kremlin is already saying they don't believe that there's going to be anything new. It was so interesting because we asked the spokesman for Vladimir Putin, for the president of Russia, whether or not they would be watching this hearing. And they said, no, they wouldn't because they have other things to do. But of course, they are indeed going to be watching very closely to see if anything new comes out. And you could really feel the frustration building up among the Russians over the past couple of weeks. We've been seeing that, Anna, very, very closely, how they believe that they want this topic to simply go away. They say they've answered all the questions. They say there hasn't been any evidence to link them to any sort of interference in the U.S. electoral process. And they also feel that in the U.S. discussion, their country is being demonized. This is what we heard from Vladimir Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov. Let's listen in.
We faced a situation when Russia all of a sudden became, let's say, a nightmare for the United States. And we sincerely cannot understand why American people and American politicians started the process of self-humiliation.
So self-humiliation is the word that he uses there. And certainly if you speak to Russians here on the streets as well, they also say they wish that this topic would finally go away. And one of the reasons, of course, is quite a pragmatic one. The Russians really never made any secret of the fact that they wanted Donald Trump to win, at least the majority of Russians and certainly many people in the Russian government. But of course, they did that for pragmatic reasons. They wanted better relations between the U.S. and Russia. In the end, they want sanctions relief of some of the international sanctions slapped on Russia, especially over the Ukraine crisis. And so far, with the way things are going in the Trump administration, they really don't feel that they've made any headway in that direction, Anna.
But as you've been talking with those folks there in Moscow about these relations between Russia and the United States, what more are they telling you in terms of what they're feeling right now and concerns that they may have?
Well, I mean, one of the big concerns is that the relations will continue to be bad. Look, it's no secret that many Russians here have been suffering under the sanctions that were slapped on their country, as I said, over the Ukraine crisis, over Crimea, of course, as well. And people are looking for that to go away. And there really was a sense that that's something that could happen with this new president in office, with Donald Trump taking power. And now it seems as though that could be slipping away once again. One of the things, however, Anna, that I have to point out that it hasn't hurt is the approval ratings of Vladimir Putin. Those are still very much going strong as this crisis goes on.
Interesting. Fred Plakin, thank you. Joining me now, CNN crime and justice producer Shimon Prokopets and Washington Post national reporter and author of the Fix blog, Chris Cillizet. So, Shimon, the White House has said President Trump wasn't necessarily speaking literally about a physical wiretap, but more generally about surveillance. And that sentiment seemed to be echoed by the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee today when he said the committee was really pushing to learn more about the leaking of names by the media. Let's listen.
But we had a deadline of Friday for the NSA, FBI, and CIA to get us those names that were unmasked through the FISA system. We didn't get those names on Friday. So until we get those names, we can't rule this out.
So, Shimon, how do you see this issue coming up tomorrow when Comey testifies?
Well, the question of surveillance and wiretap is probably going to be one of the first questions that Comey faces. And he's prepared to answer that. And we're told by several officials that he's prepared to say there was no surveillance of Donald Trump. There was no surveillance at Trump Tower or any kind of wiretapping. The one key thing here is Comey will not address whether private citizens are under investigation. So those are the people who are kind of surrounding Trump, people from the campaign. Names have been reported out there. We should not expect to see any of that. The FBI, just sort of as a policy, does not comment on investigations. They generally don't even confirm whether investigations are open or closed. So we shouldn't expect to hear anything really outside of Trump tomorrow.
Perhaps they're trying to lower expectations then. So if that's the case, because there's this ongoing investigation, what information could we see this week from the FBI, but also the CIA and the NSA?
So I think we're hoping maybe some of what they already talked about when they issued their report, some of what Russia was trying to do here, some of what Russia is trying to do across the world, really, in influencing and meddling in elections, some of the fake news that they distributed and the impact that that had on the election. But anything really to do with any sort of investigation that is being undertaken by the FBI, I think we're going to be a little disappointed, because I think he's going to be careful, that is, Comey is going to be careful in how he answers those questions, because there's a lot they still don't know. You know, there's been a lot of reports about stuff, but we haven't really heard anything from really the most powerful person in this entire investigation. And tomorrow, perhaps, we'll get a little glimpse of what's going on.
President Trump has accused President Obama of ordering surveillance, but let's listen to what he had to say about his predecessor on Fox.
You know, he's been very nice to me personally, but his people haven't been nice. And there's great animosity out there. There's great anger. Leaking is just one example of it. In some cases, a very serious example of it. But leaking and the level of anger is hard to believe. So while he's nice personally, there doesn't seem to be a lot of nice things happening behind the scenes.
Chris, we've heard from people connected to President Obama, but do you think we'll ever hear from President Obama directly during this investigation?
No. I think he's trying everything he can to make the handoff of power, which has already happened, but we're still in the early stages, be as newsless as possible. It's hard to make something newsless when it relates to Donald Trump. But look, I think Barack Obama is only going to sound off on things like you saw with the Women's March, when the accusation that Donald Trump made on Twitter that he had wiretapped Trump Tower. You saw Obama's spokesman put a statement out. But no, you know, we don't typically hear from former presidents of the United States about current presidents. It's one of those things that's not really done, second guessing. And even though this is a unique situation, obviously Donald Trump ran to basically undo everything Barack Obama did. I still think Barack Obama himself is very much committed to honoring that sort of tradition of, if something about your legacy is directly attacked or is made directly untrue, he'll come out and say something. But I don't think you're going to see him sort of in the daily back and forth.
Well, depth, special coverage, a preview of this hearing tomorrow. FBI Director James Comey testifying on the Hill about Russia. John Berman anchors a special report tonight at 11 p.m. Eastern. Still ahead here in the newsroom, Gorsuch and the ghost of Garland. President Trump's pick for the Supreme Court braces for his hearing this week on Capitol Hill. But will he be haunted by the nominee who never got a hearing? And the art of the deal, President Trump tries to get reluctant Republicans on board with the health care bill.